right, so Ben, it's all on you, my friend. All right.
Come on in.
Do a quick intro.
Yeah.
Okay, so that you recognize a familiar face. We have a special guest speaker tonight, and Ben here, a number of people don't know, is a graduate of Harvard University, got a bachelor's degree, and also has a master's in business administration from the Wharton School of Business, which is at the University of Pennsylvania. And it's probably one of the world's most prestigious business schools. So Ben comes with a tremendous academic background. Ben's been a believer for just a few years, and he and I have been working together, for like the last 2 or 3 years, probably maybe 3, maybe going over 3 years now. And Ben, this is the topic that was made for Ben to attack here. And so Ben has been working on this stuff. Some of you know that he was a former financial advisor working Wall Street in New York City and all of that, and is now a writer. And so he spends half the year in the mountains of Brazil in his little writer's chalet, and the other time he spends on South Beach and helps out with our street evangelism program. So it's great that Ben, who has to leave for Brazil in the next few weeks, I think.
Next week from Friday.
A week from Friday, he'll be heading back up to his mountain retreat in Brazil to work on his next book. But in the meantime, he's now able to teach a Bible class in Portuguese to some of the youngsters that he's helping with English over there. So it's proof that to be involved in ministry, you don't necessarily need a theology degree or to graduate from some divinity school. That probably is going to mess up your theology a little bit. But we're grateful that Ben is making time to help us with our street evangelism program in South Beach, as well as our, this is his very first time ever standing, if you will, in the pulpit, if you will, giving an actual Bible teaching. So tonight's topic is going to be an overview of creation versus evolution and the lie of science, falsely so-called, which is what we find in Scripture. So without further ado, I'm going to bring to you guys our brother in the Lord, man, and our Harvard University resident scholar, theologian, professional writer, Ben Batchelder, man.
Thank you very much, Herb.
My pleasure.
Good evening, everyone. I'm obviously not Herb. I am Ben Batchelder. And yes, I confess I did go to Harvard, but please don't hold it against me. If I were the type to blame others, I would say that my parents made me do it. Okay, so let's start off if we can. Steve, could you start us in prayer? And please include a prayer for me that the Holy Spirit helps me out this evening.
Lord God, we thank you for Brother Ben today. Glad that, Lord, you led him from a life that was outside of what your will was, Lord, to bring him to understand what you've done for him, the way you changed his life, Lord, and like how now he's taken that belief, that faith, Lord, and now teaching others, just the way I guess that you asked for us to do, to go out and share the gospel. Ben doing so here today, Lord. Thank you for the opportunity for it. Thank you for her, for bringing him along, for the rest of those out in internet land, and be encouraged and pray for them as well. Lord, we thank you again for the opportunity to gather today. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Thank you, Steve. And I apologize in advance. I'm going to be doing a little more reading. Herb retains like a lot of stuff up here, whereas I am not quite as with it. So I'm going to do a little more reading, but bear with me. I appreciate it. Okay, so the thesis of today's study is as follows. Evolution after communism and socialism is the biggest lie and deception foisted on the human race. So thanks. That's great. The subject is huge and only gets huger as evolutionists create more and more elaborate and bizarre theories whenever their past positions are proven false. Yet it is the subject that most easily corrupts churches, hollows people's faith, and turns believers into non-believers. Furthermore, it is an area where few Bible-believing Christians wish to tread, as the science is complicated and the opposition to creation is ferocious
Mm.
throughout the entire public education, media, science, and political establishments. The forces are large. Creationists or dissenters are silenced, called deniers on the same moral ground as Holocaust deniers, called idiots, and lose their jobs. Just to give you one quote from one of the foremost evolutionists of our day, it is absolutely safe, quote, it is absolutely safe to say that if you meet someone who claims to believe in evolution, who claims not to believe in evolution, that person is ignorant, stupid, or insane. All right?
Right.
So, in other words, everyone in this room tonight is ignorant, stupid, or insane. And that's from Richard Dawkins. Put your money in evolution in the New York Times, April 9th, 1999. Our Bible study group watched Ben Stein's documentary, Expelled, No Intelligence Allowed, which clearly shows that professors who only wish to debate if intelligent design is as viable an explanation as evolution lose their jobs, grants, and careers. Ben Stein is no Bible-thumping Christian. He's a Jew and secular Jew, as far as I can tell. If you'd like to see the depth of our educational system's intellectual bankruptcy, I heartily recommend it. Ben Stein's documentary, Expelled. Recall that the theory of evolution, not the law of evolution. Recall that it is the theory of evolution, not the law of evolution, even if most of its disciples treat it as the most fundamental law of the universe. It is in fact unproven and never will be proven. Scientific method requires that phenomena and hypothetical results must be observable and repeatable. The so-called Big Bang Theory is not a repeatable experiment and can never be proven true. But evolution itself, at least the kind of evolution that has anything to do with the origin of species, has also never been observed and never will be. The more one studies the theory of evolution, the clearer it becomes that it has almost nothing to do with true verifiable science, and is simply a secular religion, a cult that is almost obviously based on lies, almost entirely based on lies. As David Hunt famously defined it, a cult means that you must check your brain at the door before entering. It is so firmly established, however, that it has become the state-sanctioned religion, which is taught at the exclusion of any other ideas, theories, or the truth. To quote one of the 20th century's leading zoologists and professor of comparative anatomy at the University College, named D.M.S. Wilson, who was awarded the prestigious Darwin Wallace Medal in 1958 and was more honest man than most evolutionists today, quote, "The theory of evolution itself, a theory universally accepted, not because it can be proved or logically coherent, or proved by logically coherent evidence to be true, but because the only alternative, special creation, is clearly incredible." And that's from his article, good evening, Ingrid, Adaptation in Nature, Volume 124, August 10, 1929. So if you caught that, he's saying that the only alternative to evolution is special creation, that is, creation by God, and that is clearly incredible, meaning too incredible, we can't even touch it. Or, more recently in 1997, here is the evolutionist and biologist Richard Lewontin saying something similar, and he's quoted in Dave Hunt's excellent Cosmos, Creator, and Human Destiny. Unfortunately, I don't have the book jacket, but there is, that comes out pretty well from the book binding.
Anna White here helping out if you need help.
Thank you. His latest greatest work, his last great work, if I'm not mistaken,
Yeah.
published in 2010, And let me go directly to the quote.
Dave, by the way, Dave Hunt has a degree in mathematics from UCLA. He has no theological training other than the fact that he read the Bible every day for however many hours.
Yeah.
But again, here's another guy with a scientific and rational basis upon which he approaches the Bible, and yet he finds evolution to be what you're about to tell us.
Yeah. And so he's quoting Richard Lewontin, who says, quote, "We are forced by our a priori adherence to material causes to create an apparatus of investigation and a set of concepts that produce material explanations, no matter how counterintuitive. Materialism is an absolute, for we cannot allow a divine foot in the door." Okay, so he is just saying in words in 1999 pretty much the same as Mr. Wilson was saying in 1929. They cannot allow a divine foot into the door. Clearly, we are dealing with a very dangerous cult, which is a priori denies the Creator. Both Marx and Stalin were nominally Christian until reading Darwin. One statistic forwarded by Kent Hovind claims that 75% of children from Christian homes who attend public schools reject their Christian faith after the first year of college, with evolution one of the major causes. One of the theory of evolution's most evil offshoots was called social Darwinism, which pitted ethnic group against ethnic group, class against class, nation against nation, in the so-called struggle for survival, and blossomed into both communism and fascism of the 20th century, which slaughtered over 90 million innocent people. And while Hitler's genocidal fanaticism killed off social Darwinism among both intellectuals and polite society, we are still dealing with fire here, folks, in one of the most pernicious deceptions in human history. I don't want to go too topical, but I would say that we are, as a society, we are not evolving, we are devolving, as pitting class against class and race against race is back again, and it's gotten much worse in recent years. So let's start here with a little book. All right, here it is.
What book is that?
All right, this is The Origin of Species. Now you'll notice from the cover, it doesn't give the subtitle.
Who wrote that book again?
This is Charles Darwin, The Origin of Species. Now his subtitle in all modern versions has been cut out. And the reason is that let's take a look at the subtitle right here, because this is a 150th anniversary edition, so they had to be honest. There it is. And the subtitle is by means of natural, so the origin of species, by means of natural selection of the preservation of favored races in the struggle for life. If you think that sounds racist, you're right. As Darwin later wrote, at some point, quote, at some point not very far distant, as measured by centuries, the civilized races of man will almost certainly exterminate and replace throughout the world the savage races. The Descent of Man, Volume 1, page 201. Now, in case you think he's talking about killing off Neanderthal man in frozen caves, let's hear another quote, this one on the institution of marriage. But first, let me show a picture here. We have to have a few visuals. Here who we're talking about, that is Mr. Darwin. Now we'll go back here. Now, ladies out there, before you find him attractive, let me quote what he says about marriage, the institution of marriage, one of the most important created by God. Quote, "A married man is a poor slave worse than a Negro." The Autobiography of Charles Darwin, page 234. Now, I don't wish to participate in character assassination, but rather to reveal what today's fervent evolutionists and Darwinists will cover up: the corrupt prophet of their religion, as unattractive a figure as Muhammad. So let's look instead at the work itself in a bit of Darwin's history. The Voyage of the Beagle, which I don't have here, it's actually down south in Brazil, and I read it just recently. It's a book from 1839, 20 years prior to the publication of The Origin of Species. It's the book that first made Darwin an established author. This is the voyage that Darwin, as a young man, took from England down the east coast of Brazil and up the west coast of South America to Galapagos, where he famously noticed small differences in the local finches, and then westward through the southern hemisphere by Australia and Africa, or before returning to England. Interestingly, Darwin was a theology student who left his studies en route to be an Anglican pastor, as his father desired him to be, in order to become a naturalist. He was hired onto the 5-year voyage as a gentleman naturalist without having finished his degree. And therefore Darwin, along with the other 2 ancestors of modern evolution, was never a scientist. So the theory was created by really 3 men who were not scientists. 20 years later, he published Origin of Species, although many of its concepts were borrowed, including from his Freemason grandfather Erasmus, whom he credited little. It synthesized them. While the title is a misnomer, he explains or describes the origin of not one species. It can be summarized as, quote, natural selection through, quote, the survival of the fittest. My Oxford Dictionary defines natural selection as, quote, the Darwinian theory of the survival and propagation of organisms best adapted to their environment, end quote, which makes survival of the fittest sound a little less cutthroat. Yet death of the unfit and survival of the better evolved remains critical to the process, which assumes that cellular mutations lead to something new and better, and that natural selection weeds out the weak and favors the fittest to survive and take over the population. Essentially, as pointed out by Kent Hovind, evolution is the religion of death. All right, so let me go back a little bit to, briefly, evolution's antecedents. Dr. Henry Morris, in his 1989 The Long War Against God, which is another highly recommended book for those interested in this subject. And this goes into far greater detail than I will be able to cover this evening on the long history and sad history. Persuasively traces evolution back to ancient Babylon, or Nimrod at Babel, through Greek philosophers Plato and Aristotle, whose scala naturae became the great chain of being. I have some more visuals this evening. This here is a 1579 drawing of the great chain of being, which then already means that this already was a semi-Christianized version of the scale of where are we? Yeah, of what's translated as the Scala Natura, or scale of nature, and it became a supposed ranking of the lesser to greater creatures, which was semi-Christianized, so this is pagan beliefs, that were then semi-Christianized by Thomas Aquinas, 13th century Italy, and others into the scale of being, with man closest to God. So again, what we're looking at is, there's the Lord supposedly on top, men below, and then you have an idea of descending down to lower and lower orders.
You
Yes,
said,
sir.
You said that Thomas Aquinas was involved in sort of syncretizing this sort of pagan flow chart into
Exactly.
like Aquinas was a big dude in Catholicism, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Wow.
Okay.
Secular humanism meets organized religion.
Yeah. And by the way, there's the chain actually going right down the middle of this picture. A little hard to see, but there we are. Now, so it was semi-Christianized by Thomas Aquinas and others into the scale of being with man the closest to God. This would later transform into evolution over long geologic ages, becoming the principle by means by which ancient paganism infiltrated the modern world. If you would like to see a more recent version of the chain of being, here it is. So this is the 1874 reinterpreted chain of being by Ernst Haeckel. As you can see here, this is Granddaddy Amoeba, or great-great-granddaddy up at the top, and then man down at the bottom, through a whole chain of bizarre evolutionary steps. All right. So so we have a clear idea that what Darwin thought up was not really. He was synthesizing a whole number of thoughts and pagan beliefs, and bringing them back into the modern world with a vengeance.
Ben, can you pass that around?
Oh yeah, absolutely. These are too good to miss. And by the way, these I found on Wikipedia. These are not, this image is not supposed to be one that makes fun of it. This is just an image to show what most of the world believes in. It sure was that nice how back in 1874 they would have images like this, but pretty much it's saying, this is the real thing. My goodness. Okay, so that gets back to the more ancient antecedents. But then in 1795, James Hutton wrote The Theory of Earth. James was another Scot, which made people doubt the young Earth. So if you're thinking, all right, how did evolution creep into Bible-believing churches and eventually take over so many mainstream churches, including the Catholic one? It started in 1795, The Theory of the Earth, which made people doubt the young Earth. All right, so saying the Earth cannot